Great. Thank you so much, Lubor, and thank you so much for all those attending virtually today. I was trying to do the math before we started, and I think this is my 7th year talking at the NAMES conference, and it always is a fantastic event filled with some great content. And that really is my charge for you all today, is to deliver to you some thought-provoking, relevant, and resonant content around your manufacturing management system. So again, thank you for joining me. My name is Shane Yount. I am the president of Competitive Solutions, and I'm delighted to be with you this afternoon. So my message to you today: does your manufacturing management system, does it really work? Is it delivering to the business the results, the engagement that was promised? And I want to challenge you as we go through the session this afternoon to really reflect on: do you have a low functioning management system, a high functioning management system, or something in between? Because I'm going to articulate what that spectrum looks like and feels like this afternoon. So just a little context of who I am. I'm coming to you all today from Raleigh, North Carolina. That's our corporate headquarters. Our firm was founded in 1991, so it's hard to believe, but this is our 30th year helping organizations optimize their people, processes, and performance. I've had the pleasure of writing a number of books over the years, and today I'm going to talk to you about this idea of process-based leadership, really as the framework for a high-functioning management system. Now, as we jump into this, I'm also going to share with you a lot of experiences and clients. Having been in this space for 30 years, we've had the great honor of working with what we believe to be some of the best organizations in the world. And as I was sharing with some of the executive platform folks before joining the call today, many of these relationships began right here in this event, where folks heard us speak and said, you know what, as I listen to Shane and his team, I want to move our organization toward a greater state of high functioning management system alignment. And so we're thrilled to be able to talk to some of our friends again, but also meet some new potential clients this week. So, as we jump into this message today, I want to use a metaphor, right, to kind of guide us through the next 25 minutes or so. And it really is around, does your management system, does it need a tune-up? Is it really delivering the results that it was designed and intended to do? I don't know if any of you all got a chance to hear Rebecca this morning from PPG, but one of the things she continued to come back to as she articulated their digital transformation was the importance of their management operating system, their MOS. And I think it's important that as you listen to me, if you heard Rebecca, if you didn't, go back and listen to that PPG conversation, because the power of a high functioning management system cannot be underestimated. But I think it's also important as we begin this conversation this afternoon to really reflect for a minute around, well, how does it feel today, right? Is that management system really delivering to the business what we designed it to? And we can't have this conversation without talking a bit about the last 18 months, because in the last 18 months, I would suggest to you that many management systems have been pressure tested to understand, do we have the same system in times of stability that we do in times of volatility? See, I'm going to suggest to you, many of the conversations we've had, particularly in the last several weeks, have really been around how do we move from this crisis management system, in essence, this shadow system that we've been running for the last 18 months, back to that way of work that we designed pre-pandemic, right? That way of work that guided our disciplined management system before there was a pandemic. See, I think today some organizations are struggling with two management systems. One they used the last 18 months in times of volatility, and the one they had 18 months ago in times of stability. See, I'm going to talk to you a lot this afternoon about, I believe there was a failure to iterate the content of conversation. And you're going to hear me use that word over and over again, this idea of iteration, right? Because I believe it is essential to having a fully functioning management system. How about another thing to reflect on? A lot of us were involved in our organizations in the initial design of our management system. And one of the promises of that management system was that it should make things simpler. It should become user-friendly, if you will, in the way we run our business. But I would also ask you to ask yourself in the last several months or the last several years, is that management system simplifying? Or have you seen a multiplication of meetings and metrics and mandates, right? See, that's an interesting concept as we begin to think about, do we have a low functioning or high functioning management system? Because at the end of the day, that management system should be moving the business forward, not with more to do, but as the enabler of the work that we have to do. You know, many of y'all that attend this conference, because I've met many of you, you know, you've stood up over the years an OpEx organization, a Lean Six Sigma organization. You've stood up black belts and green belts to help you deploy your management system. But I would ask you to reflect for a second and say, you know, has that management system really been about auditing compliance? You know, I have a client that I met at the NAMES conference several years ago, and, you know, they talked about how the white van would show up at facilities, and we knew when the white van pulled in the parking lot, a team of black belts were going to get out and they were going to go audit all the tier boards. And it became around auditing the compliance of the system versus having a process-based or iterated leadership conversation. We're going to talk about that this afternoon. And then I think lastly, what I think is something that we continue to struggle with, and we've seen it amplified in the last 18 months, is we see leaders leaning into what we describe as the 3 Ps, just to try to keep the management system moving and operational. We describe these 3 Ps as, are you managing by your physical proximity, your powers of persuasion, and your positional authority? If those 3 Ps are required, if you being there, you know, manufacturing, we never went remote, right? Most of our manufacturing clients didn't miss a beat. They've been running nonstop the last 18 months. But does your physical proximity as a leader, is it required to keep that management system moving? If you didn't attend a tier meeting or you weren't in a dashboard meeting, what would the content of conversation be? If your physical powers of persuasion wasn't there to convince and to cajole performance, what would happen? Have you had to default to your positional authority just to keep the management system moving forward? See, ladies and gentlemen, those 3 Ps, while they will drive forward momentum, they aren't compatible with a high functioning 3C management system. So I just ask you to think in the next few minutes, is it time for a tune-up? Do you see these elements in place in your management system today? And are you desiring what we describe as this 3C management system? Now, as we have this conversation this afternoon, we're going to use this model to frame our dialogue. And this model is meant to illustrate, at the end of the day, if you take nothing away that I say this afternoon, there's 3 words I want you to remember. Because at the heart of a good MOS, at the heart of a good management system, these 3 elements have to be there, not in an abstract theoretical manner, but a real and validatable precision. And I talk about connectivity, clarity, and consistency. Let me just very quickly give you my definition of those words, because they're at the heart of what a high functioning management system must deliver. When we talk about connectivity, that's the capacity of people to know if we're winning or losing. We're going to talk about data in this session this afternoon. But at the end of the day, if people can't answer the question, did we win or lose? Listen, it's not about data literacy. It's not about more metrics. It's about a simple conversation that we have not connected people to the metrics that matter. We've got to build a rhythm and a cadence of communication that drives clarity. You know, I often say what people don't know, they make up, right? It's the fundamental Achilles heel of trying to drive better communication. What people don't know, they make up, they fill in the blanks. And if we don't have a rhythm and a cadence of communication that drives clarity, we will forever, as leaders, be operating from a position of defense, not offense. And then lastly, this idea of consistency. When I say consistency, all I'm describing is a way of work, right? A way of work that's the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. See, I believe if we want a high functioning management system, we have to keep these 3 words at the center of that. All of our systems, all of our processes have to be driving us there. And when we can begin to put together the proper thoughtware with the right software. And I'm going to talk about both of these this afternoon. The process-based leadership methodology as the thoughtware and Yount as the software, then I think we have the highest probability to create that high-functioning management system. So let's jump in and kind of diagnose each of these four elements here. As you think about your current management system, you see I've got two panes here. I've got low functioning and high functioning. And I want to just pull out a couple of themes here that hopefully will get you to reflect a minute on your current system. Let's talk about data visualization. See, with all the tools that are available for industry today, and there are thousands to help us visualize data, our business acumen is still at an all-time low. How is that even possible? I'm going to speak to that. I think we've got hidden factories generating charts and graphs that no one's ever going to look at. In fact, I'd ask you, not right now while I'm talking, but maybe in the next session, look at your email right now. Find an email that's got an attachment of some type of spreadsheet, dashboard, scorecard, KPI metric, and ask yourself, when was the last time you opened that attachment? When was the last time you even read what was in there, used it to inform yourself, used it to make decisions, used it to take corrective actions? See, I think we've built hidden factories. Organizations have built hidden factories generating charts and graphs no one's ever going to use. It's about visualization again. And so we know how to do that pretty daggone well. But unfortunately, that's created what I describe as a bunch of thermometers. And you're going to hear me use this metaphor throughout my time together. Does your management system, does it feel like a thermometer or a thermostat? Is it a passive report or an active positioning device? See, all that data visualization efforts, what it often creates is just a whole bunch of thermometers, not thermostats. And the way that manifests itself, and I was in a virtual meeting yesterday with what has now become one of our clients, is where it's created within our meetings what I describe as an explanation culture, not an execution culture. It's where we go into the meeting with a lot of data visualization points. But in the meeting, here's the conversation. We talk about what happened, where it happened, who it happened to, when it happened. And we exhaust ourselves talking about those elements. And we never get to, okay, well, what action are we going to take to get back on track? Let's create that action with what I describe as 12-month clarity so that next week we're not having the same explanation conversation of where it happened, who it happened to, when it happened. We've got to expect more, ladies and gentlemen, from our management system than just a conversation of explanation. We've got to create a high-functioning management system that's not about visualization, but rather utilization. And the way I frame utilization, I'm going to give you 3 words and they actually rhyme. So it makes it easy to retain, right? I talk about utilization takes 3 forms: educate, facilitate, motivate. Very quickly, in your organization today, when a new member joins any team at any level, from the C-suite to the shop floor, in their onboarding, in their orientation, do they get welcome to the team? Here are the metrics that matter. Here's what all these acronyms mean as we track and report our metrics. Here's what winning and losing looks like. Here's our past month's performance or quarter's performance and how we've done if we've moved the business forward or stalled. Have you integrated into your onboarding, new employee assimilation, that educate component? How about facilitate? When you walk into any meeting, and I'm talking about a tier meeting, a shift huddle, a project meeting, what's the first thing people see when they walk in that room? Is it an agenda? Is it a ground rule? See, I don't think it should be any of those. I think it should be the scorecard for that team. I think that scorecard should be populated prior to the meeting. It should be projected in the meeting so it sets the tone of the meeting before a verbal word is spoken. See, if you don't have that, guess what's going to set the tone in that meeting? We're back to the 3 Ps: proximity, persuasion, position. We need to use metrics to facilitate the meetings. We need to expect our meetings to move the business forward. We're beyond meetings for the sake of meetings, meetings for the sake of socialization. We need to expect our meetings to move the business forward, and we need to build the data utilization process to do that. And then lastly, we need to motivate, which I mean iterate, right? Every 90 days, we need to be iterating our metrics. And I'm going to say more on that momentarily. So we're building a thermostatic approach to metrics. So we're creating a culture within our meetings, not just of explanation, but of execution. So that my vision of a high functioning management system is I can be at a guard shack or a time clock or a break room or a cafeteria at the end of the shift, at the end of a day, at the end of the week, and I can randomly ask the question, did we win or lose? And I don't get the abstract answer. I don't get the answer that is predicated on how I feel, how tired I am, how frustrated I am. I don't get the anecdotal answer. I get the empirical answer because I've built metrics that matter in a thermostatic process that informs winning and losing at the practical level. Now, to do that, you got to have a tool, right? It's the combination of thoughtware and software. Our tool is Yount. We have a number of our clients from 3M to Colgate who use this as their single source of truth, not just to visualize the data, right? But to create within their organization this idea that data literacy isn't about turning everyone into a data scientist. It's about simply creating the ability to discern winning and losing, to build through a common shared platform this thermostatic metric process that migrates our conversations from explanation to execution. But see, that's only one part of the three. Let's talk about execution or engagement or accountability for a second. See, when I'm describing that, let me talk about a low functioning management system. I often say there are very few true teams in industry today. And sometimes that causes folks to get a little uncomfortable when I say that. Very few true teams, because here's what I often see, a false positive. A false positive around engagement, where within a team, let's say you have 10 people. If I visited that team one time and attended their meeting, here's what I might see. I might see a couple of people being highly engaged, a couple of people doing a lot of the talking, offering up some ideas, offering up some input, volunteering for actions. If I visited that meeting one time and one time only, I may audit compliance, what I said earlier, and say, you know what, that meeting, that felt pretty good, right? They followed this agenda, they had these elements of our management system. But if I followed that team for 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, what often emerges is not a culture of collective accountability, but rather selective engagement. That those same 2 or 3 people in that team of 10 are the ones that always do the talking, are the ones that always take the action, are the ones that if they didn't say a word, the meeting would be over in 2 minutes because it's a monologue of the supervisor, not a collaborative conversation about moving the business forward that's shared consistently and collectively across the team. See, the biggest demotivating factor in many teams today is that disparity of engagement. We have an obligation. If you want to build a high functioning management system, it starts by changing the narrative of accountability. It's not how you feel, it's what you do. What are you doing to move the business forward? See, accountability is not an abstract concept. We've got to make it a real, visible, personal, measurable concept. And when we do, we can start connecting some dots. Let's go back to that scorecard. Are we winning or losing? When we're losing, I need to bolt onto that. This idea of visible, personal, measurable accountability. See, in our management system approach, we put as much emphasis on the accountability execution component that we do on the metric, are we winning or losing component. Because ladies and gentlemen, if you don't weight those equally, you will have metrics that are thermometers. We want a thermostatic metric process, that thermostatic approach that allows us to feel and see the temperature of the room, but then have the functionality to go do something about it. That's what accountability should be, the functionality to go do something about what your metrics are telling you. And when you begin to think that way, then you can begin to measure engagement. I get so passionate talking about this because this is what's missing in so many organizations. I'm speaking at an HR conference later this week, and one of the things I'm trying to push our HR partners to get their head around is it's not about how you feel, it's about what you do. And we need to create within the business the platform, the digital platform, to measure engagement, to measure the number of actions each member on this team has, to measure their delivery of those actions, to then look at the impact of those actions against our scorecard performance. See, when we can begin to have that level of data, then we can begin to have some pretty cool dialogue. And through that dialogue, we can actually develop our team. But if you don't have data, if I don't have the ability to sit down with people, be it in my monthly one-on-one or my quarterly review, and look at their contribution, their literal contribution of actions that they've taken against red metrics, their delivery of those actions and the impact of those actions, ladies and gentlemen, we're never going to fix performance management. Because the way we think of performance management today, in my opinion, is flawed. Because it goes back to how people are feeling about themselves, about their team, about their leader, about their future, about their career. Yes, those are important conversations, but the conversation we need to have today is, what have you done to move the business forward? That's what a high functioning management system does. It produces for the organization not an abstract concept of accountability, but a bolt on to the metrics that frames the narrative of what have you done to move the business forward. And I would just say as an aside here, that conversation, when we begin to have that conversation, now we're speaking to moving our team to a team powered, not by the select few, not what happens when one of those people leave and the team atrophies, but rather a culture of collective accountability. We also have to operationalize this. Listen, we could spend all day talking about effective communication, but let me say this: low functioning management systems. And maybe this was you this morning. You know, one of my standard work things I do every morning when I get my first cup of coffee is I immediately look at my outlook for the week, right? And for that day, right? How many meetings do I have? What's going on that day? And many of us, when we look at that outlook, our first thought is, how am I going to get any work done? Because we see our day planned with meeting after meeting after meeting. And the result of that, the emotion of that is those meetings feel more like an in addition to the work as opposed to the enabler of the work, right? I talked earlier about this idea of clarity, a rhythm and a cadence that allows us as leaders to operate from a position of offense. Too often we play defense. So much time we spend a week reiterating, recommunicating, reclarifying, because our rhythm and cadence of communication is weak. It's ill-defined. It's suspect. And listen, if you don't have a good process, here's what's going to happen. Personalities will drive it each and every time. And I see today, often in the lack of a good process, the first action is, let's call a meeting. We did a study in 2020, near the end of the pandemic last year, November to be exact. And we looked at leaders and how much time we spend in meetings. 78% of their week is in meetings. Ladies and gentlemen, that's a low functioning management system. If you're spending 78% of your time in meetings, let me be crystal clear, that is a low functioning management system. Now, how do you get to a high functioning? Well, it requires the organization to deconstruct your current communication process and reconstruct it with the framework that I'm advocating. The framework that gets us to 6 hours of meetings a week. Now, that's not a typo, and nor did I misspeak. 6 hours of meetings a week should be our expectation around the cadence required to move the business forward, where we begin to look at this process, ladies and gentlemen, and I talk a lot about tiers, right? And one thing I want to just pull out in this slide, because I think it's an example of a low functioning management system. And what I illustrated here on this slide is you've got tier 1 down the shop floor up to maybe tier 8, tier 9. At 3M, who I do work with, they have 9 tiers, right? Mike Roman, the CEO, is tier 9, all the way down to tier 1. The mistake that I often see in the absence of a high functioning management system, you have the higher tiers, the tier 6, 7, 8, reaching down and through the organization, operating transactionally, not transformationally. Are you operating transactionally or transformationally? See, that's the question as leaders we have to ask and answer ourselves. Because in a low functioning management system, you have leaders reaching down and through to get their questions answered because they don't trust their management system. They don't trust the data literacy and the process in which we get data. So they're reaching down and through and asking specific questions. I was with a client not long ago where one of the executives in a meeting, in their weekly staff meeting, went all the way down to a frontline supervisor in a distribution center to go out and count rail cars because they didn't believe the on-time in full shipping data that they were looking at on their corporate dashboard. Ladies and gentlemen, that's a low functioning management system. You've got to build your process so at each tier, we're focused either transactionally or transformationally, and we know where we fit. So what am I saying here in my remaining minutes? We've got to create a compressed and disciplined cadence of communication. You know, I was a client that we met last year at this event, one of the fastest growing food companies in the nation. Their VP of supply chain said to me 2 weeks ago in Richmond, Virginia, our issue is not a data issue, it's a discipline issue. We've got all the data we could possibly even look at. It's a discipline issue, and that's what I'm describing here. A high-functioning management system creates a compressed cadence, a disciplined cadence, utilizing a business acumen process and an execution process in concert to move the business forward, so we as leaders operate from a position of offense, not defense. But there's a fourth and final one, ladies and gentlemen, and this is the behavioral piece. And if you look at the way that we built this model, we built this model to illustrate that this is what holds it all together. You see some low functioning management system comments there, and I would just say this. Many of you all on this call right now, you've got values and principles. They were built globally. They're in all your conference rooms. What we haven't done is taken those values and principles and built what I call ideal behaviors at the localized level. The building of ideal behaviors at the localized level, because if we don't have those ideal behaviors, we don't have the glue that moves us from auditing compliance to calibrated leadership. From auditing that management system to moving to an iterated and calibrated leadership level, so I know what those ideal behaviors are, where we document those behaviors in a handbook, where we utilize that handbook to say, welcome to the organization, here's how we roll. Because listen, ladies and gentlemen, if you don't have that, here's what happens. You go through an exercise where we're going to go right back to managing by the 3 Ps, because we haven't built the ideal behaviors that holds it all together. So what have I said this afternoon, right? You want to build a high functioning management system. Many of us, we've done the align, design, and document. I've seen binders in offices from 2-inch binders to 5-inch binders around aligning and designing and documenting the architecture for a high performing management system. What I often rarely see is that we've done just as good a job about iterating, keeping the business moving forward through reflecting, reinforcing, resetting. At 3M, one of the things they'll tell you that was the catalyst to their velocity model was every 90 days looking at it and asking themselves the question, are we moving the business forward? Is it speaking to our current conditions? And there is no better example of that iteration that 3M went through the pandemic with N95 mask, right? So how do we do this, right? How does our firm approach clients like 3M and Colgate and Rust-Oleum? Well, it starts with that discovery piece, looking at, do we currently have a low functioning or a high functioning management system? And looking through the lens of that clarity, connectivity, consistency, taking that team through what we call a business boot camp, where we're going to design those processes, digitizing it through our Yount platform, which we see as that adoption accelerator, and then coming back to our clients and validating that. Because if we believe a high functioning management system delivers visible, personal, and measurable accountability, then we need to validate it. So listen, I've taken every possible second of my time with you all today, but I would love to continue this conversation. And here's how I would like to continue this conversation before I hand it back to Lubor. If you want to reach out to me to get a copy of my slide deck, we've created a landing page just for that. Maybe you're interested in discerning if you've got a low functioning or high functioning management system and you want to talk about a tune-up. We'd love to talk to you about that. Maybe a white paper on what this business boot camp looks like, or maybe even a demo of our data utilization tool. We would love to provide you with those resources, and we would love to continue the conversation. Thank you all. Thank you, Executive Platform, for allowing me to speak. Lubor, thanks for introducing me today. I certainly appreciate that, and I'm going to hand it back to you.
Thank you so much, Shane. This was a great presentation. Wow, I will forever remember the thermometer versus thermostat analogy. Love that. We don't have any time for questions, folks, but feel free to submit questions to Shane on the platform itself or through the email that he provided. Before I let you go, just a quick reminder. The next hour is a lunch hour, so please feel free to take a break, stretch your legs, whatever you need to do, maybe eat some lunch. And there's opportunities for networking, so do visit the virtual trade show floor. You can participate in public conversations and engage with others. You can ask questions, introduce yourself, take advantage of that. And then, after the hour at 2:10 p.m. Central Time, you will meet again either in the virtual room 1-2 for this afternoon's terrific case studies. And I know that our room 3 will then start a little bit later as well. So thank you so much and have a great day.